During the regime of Joseph Stalin in the mid-20th century, a man was sent to put down a rebellion by Ukrainian nationalists. He was so efficient at what he did, he was given the nickname the Butcher of the Ukraine. When Stalin died in 1953, there was a power struggle, but by 1958, the Butcher, Nikita Khrushchev, became the leader of the Soviet Union until 1964. Khrushchev was a bully. He was a brute, intent on browbeating the world into submission. He once sat at the United Nations, took off his shoe, and pounded it on the table repeatedly, trying to intimidate the representatives from other nations. And he brought the United States to the very edge of nuclear holocaust when his actions caused the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is a man who once declared to the entire world, whether you like it or not, history is on our side. We will bury you, he said. To many Americans, Khrushchev was a very scary enemy. He stood for the struggle between communism and democracy, between dictatorship and freedom. The media made it worse than it was, but even in stark reality, this era in our modern history that we call the Cold War was an age of great fear and concern among many Americans. In the midst of this Cold War, this very uncertain age, there were a few television shows and movies that depicted spies and espionage. Maybe you remember James Bond, who could forget 007? The Man from U.N.C.L.E. By the way, James Bond should only ever be played by, the Scotsman. Remember The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Mission Impossible, and others. They all dealt with the conflict between the forces of the free world and organizations that were intent on destroying them. Many of these shows can be found on cable channels by subscription even now. Among those shows was a hit sitcom created by Mel Brooks and Buck Henry called Get Smart. Making fun of what Americans most feared, they gave names to their two opposing spy networks. Do you remember what they were? Control, the good guys, upholding the cause of freedom, and Chaos, an evil organization committed to world domination. In naming the two organizations, Control and Chaos, the show's writers summed up the very conflict of the day and the fundamental conflict for us humans almost since the day God created Adam and Eve. Choosing who controls your life makes the difference between a life of peaceful freedom and a life of hardship and heartache. The Bible tells us there are two forces at war in this world. There are the forces of darkness and evil, forces bent upon robbing us of our freedom and creating chaos in our lives. The Old Testament passage that Guy read to us just a few moments ago simply calls the force for chaos the serpent. Fortunately for us, there are also the contrasting forces of light and freedom, forces that are controlled by the power and the love of God. That's us. We're on the good guys' team. But we need to choose who will control us, because when we are left to our own devices as humans, things rarely ever go well for us. And there is a stark contrast between life spent in chaos and the life we can have marked by God's loving control. Khrushchev understood that contrast. He once said the difference between Christianity and communism is great. When someone strikes you on the face, you turn the other cheek. If you strike me on the face, he said, I'll hit you so hard your head will fall off. Now, it's pretty easy for us to look on that with great disgust, and we should. But it's not as easy to live out the Christian way when the situations we face in day-to-day life aren't as dire as Khrushchev and the KGB versus the United States and the CIA. Still, we face situations every day when we have to choose who we will allow to control us, our own humanity or God, and nobody can make that decision for you. But you, for me. Parents can't make their kids do it. Many of us have tried. And kids can't make their parents make that decision. We can't coerce our friends into doing that. We can't force it on them. Every single person must come to this understanding for themselves. And no matter how good we think we are, every one of us faces decisions every day about how to react. Paul tells us in Ephesians 2, paraphrasing, we all used to follow the ways of the world and the Spirit at work in those who are disobedient. All of us have lived in those worldly ways. We have given in to our sinful nature and followed the wrong kinds of desires and thoughts. That was our nature. But then Paul continues saying, because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were already marked as dead because of our sins. It is by grace that we have been saved. Christians, we have received a great gift, this gift of salvation. So maybe because it's such an easy gift to own, we think this should be easy. Because the gift allows us to live in complete freedom. But Paul knows that our sinful nature will not allow us to live in that freedom appropriately without continual focus on the giver of the gift. In 1 Corinthians 6, Paul says that when we understand that grace, we tend to say, everything's allowed for me. I can do anything I want. But we should be saying, I know I'm allowed to do anything I want, but I also understand that not all things are beneficial. And I will not be controlled by those things. We do have free will. We can do anything we want, but our love for Jesus, if it is real, should make us want to please him. It should make us want to control our free will for the sake of ourselves and others, to allow the one who knows better than us to take the wheel. Now, I'm not one of those constant spiritual warfare preachers, but the reality is still that when we have given our lives over for God, Satan will do anything to get us back on his end of the balance sheet. Like Khrushchev, Satan's objective is world domination. But unlike Nikita, he wants to do it one soul at a time. So no, this being a Christian, this is not easy. It's an everyday, sometimes every minute of every day decision to follow Jesus. And we do that by giving him control of our lives, of our decisions, of our everyday choices, so that we can stand against evil. And how might we do that? Well, this is where the work comes in. We have to change our way of thinking. And change is always hard. One of my favorite jokes is, how many members of the Church of the Brethren does it take to change a light bulb? Change? My grandfather gave that light bulb to this church. We humans, we don't like to embrace change of any kind. But we have to dedicate ourselves to the hard work of making God, his ways, time with him, and our relationship with him and his people through our church the number one priority in our lives. And for many of us, that is as scary as the Cold War was. One of the principal tools Satan uses to accomplish his goal, as we all know, is temptation. But know, first and foremost, that Jesus has been there, done that, as we heard in our passage from Matthew today. He understands. So we know that we can resist sin and temptation because he did it. Now, I know his mother was Mary, his father was God. Mary was probably as close to the most perfect human mother as a woman could get, and I bet Joseph was earthly dad extraordinaire. He probably had an exemplary upbringing, but even so, Jesus was fully human, and he never sinned. Since that is surely true, even with our messed up childhoods, dysfunctional families, and the broken world we live in, we can certainly do better, don't you think? And isn't it great that we have this example of of a man who doesn't just tell us how to live. He lived it for us. Jesus told Satan no again and again and again, and we can too. So how do we train ourselves to do better? Because it's too easy. It's easy, isn't it, to slide back into the negative. The first step is to avoid negative input. 1 Corinthians 15 says, "Do not be deceived. Bad company ruins good morals." Now, computer experts have a very scientific phrase to describe this concept. Garbage in, garbage out. Don't spend your time with things that will fill your hearts and minds with mean-spirited, nasty language and attitudes. For example, there are certain TV shows and movies that we need to make a conscious decision not to fill our heads with. Just don't watch them. Give God control by giving Him the remote control. There are songs that make us think ugly things. And for me, this is very hard because I can memorize song lyrics better than I can remember what I had for breakfast this morning. Cheerios. I've had to say, I just can't listen to that stuff anymore. It fills my head with things I don't need to be thinking about. And there are many magazines and books that I just don't want anything to do with. The words they use, the attitudes they share. And I used to kid myself that I was doing these things to protect our son, Carter, from all of this. But he is grown and gone now, and I still don't want that stuff in my house. Garbage in, garbage out. Then, of course, if you work in certain work settings, you can count on being regularly exposed to foul language and the consistent drama of people who gossip and verbally attack others. I am happy to report that's not the situation in the church office. But I know that sometimes you have no choice but to live in an environment that is caustic, that's not good for you. In the 5th chapter of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul told the church that they had to realize they live in a pagan world. He said some kinds of negative people you can and should avoid. But if you live in this world, you're going to come into contact with people who aren't on the same road you are on. And the only way to avoid contact with all of those kinds of people is to leave this world. And since that's hardly practical, we're going to have to give God control of the situations that are out of our control. We seek His guidance about how to deal with it. Now, we won't go into the next couple of verses in that passage today, but Paul does mention that there are some people who call themselves Christians who behave that way. And the remedy is the same. Walk away. Jesus Himself said, "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him." You see, the way to connect with God and His people is not just by emptying your head and your heart of bad things. You have to fill yourself with good stuff too. We may not be able to leave this world and all its influences on us, but we can become so filled with our relationship with God that the negativity of this world just doesn't find its way into our hearts anymore, or at least not as often. When we choose to let God have control of our lives, when we focus on Him, the giver of the gift, by reading our Bibles, praying, coming to church, attending Sunday school or small group sessions, and spending time fellowshipping with other Christians, we stand a far better chance of bringing the good out of our hearts because there's good that we've poured into there. When we focus on Jesus and His kindness, when we dive in a little more every day to trying to be nicer people, there isn't room left in there to store up evil things. When we are focused on Him, people see something different in our lives that is so exciting and satisfying, they want a piece of it too. Jesus should be visible in you. I read a story about a soldier on overnight guard duty. Early in the morning, the soldier reported to his commanding officer, who demanded, "Did you sleep well while on duty, soldier?" The surprised soldier answered, "Sir, what makes you think I fell asleep on duty?" "Look in the mirror," the officer replied. As the guard looked in the mirror, he saw the imprint of the Mercedes-Benz logo from his truck's steering wheel on his forehead. And that mark revealed something about him. Brothers and sisters, Jesus should be just as visible in you. So the next time you get on Facebook, or stop to have a conversation at Giant, or enjoy a phone call with a friend or neighbor, give God control of the conversation. Be the Christian you should be. Don't talk about the idiot you ran into on aisle 4, or the way the not very bright girl at the dentist office messed up your schedule, or even about how ridiculous the politics of the school district are, or how two-faced your least favorite politician is, or how the local news weather person drives you to distraction. These are all conversations someone in this church has tried to have with me since January. And for goodness sake, don't broach the subject of the pastor's clothing or hairdo. And how about the next time you're tempted to gloss over some truth for your business, or to buy something you shouldn't charge? Be the Christian you should be. And yes, all of this takes work. It takes thinking about it, catching yourself doing something you shouldn't, and being humble enough to fix it. To say out loud or in writing on social media, hey, I made a mistake. I didn't mean to be sarcastic. I didn't mean to be haughty. I didn't mean to be rude. I meant to pay for that. I meant to file that on my taxes. It takes thinking about Jesus every day, all day long. We've all heard or said to ourselves, let go, let God. And while this is a good mantra, we need to understand what it really means. Because giving God control of your life doesn't mean you're passively sitting back doing nothing. It really means that we're allowing Him to handle things, to stop worrying. We're making plans under His control, not under our control. It means asking Him to show us. We are actively seeking His counsel and His advice on how to proceed on everything and anything. Now, why would we want to do this? Because giving control to God makes our lives flow more smoothly. It's that simple, but there's more to it than that. Another equally important reason to do it is to show your heart to other people. We are called to witness to our faith in this world, and one of the ways we do that is by letting God have control of our lives and letting other people know that we are not worried or afraid. I spent some time with Tim and Jess Dunbar at Children's Hospital in Philly. We've already talked about their daughter, Hope, and her brain surgery last week. Tim said that when Hope was having an emergency brain procedure last Thursday night, people kept saying to them and posting on social media, "You guys must be so freaked out right now." And he said he was reading these messages and he was thinking, no. I feel the prayers of so many people in the presence of God. He said, I'm actually amazed at how calm I feel. This must be that peace that passes understanding I've heard about. Tim and Jess continue to give control to God for something over which they had no control in the first place. And that very act gives them peace every day. There's a long road of recovery ahead for Hope. And we will all continue to pray for her, but knowing that our prayers are helping Tim and Jess to be at peace should help you to let go and let God too. Worry is something so many of us find so hard to get past, but when we can fully understand that the things we worry about are out of our control and embrace the one who is in control, we gain peace. When I was in my mid-30s, I was called to pursue a second career in ministry. And I went back to school as an adult. I was a full-time insurance agent, a full-time college student, a wife, a mother, and a very involved church volunteer. And I thought I had everything under control. I never left my son at daycare wondering who was picking him up. I never missed an assignment at school, work, or church. I was in complete control, and I was stressed out. I would burst into tears at the drop of a hat, and I fell asleep during Hershey Bears games at the stadium. On the outside, I was doing great. Inside, I was a worried mess. My husband said, "Keep it up, I will visit you at Phil Haven." But the more I learned about Jesus, the more I realized that this crazy, busy life stuff would be a lot easier if I gave him control of it. And I began to understand that it's okay to say no. That relaxing for an hour or so here and there is not a sin, and that I should make a priority of time spent with my husband and my family. To be honest, I still struggle with saying no and finding time to relax. As a new pastor in this church, it's even harder right now, especially since I am so desperate to get to know you all. But I'm still committed to giving God control. And I wish this giving God control was a once-and-done thing. Don't you? But I have to do that over and over again. Why? Because we all know that Satan will continually try to attack our peace and serenity with worries and doubts. He loves to whisper in your ear and remind you of all your shortcomings and just exactly who you might be letting down. He tells us we're not worthy, that we can't possibly measure up, so we have to keep giving God control, so he will keep us on the path that leads to higher ground. And every battle strategist knows that higher ground means there's a much better chance of us winning the battle. Dwight D. Eisenhower was commander of the Allied forces during World War II. In 1951, he became Supreme Commander of the newly formed North Atlantic Treaty Organization known as NATO. It had been formed to provide collective security against the threat posed by the Soviet Union. In 1952, he became the 34th President of the United States, and 2 months after he was inaugurated, the butcher of the Ukraine became the leader of the Soviet Union. Eisenhower and Khrushchev now stood toe-to-toe on a regular basis. So, Eisenhower invited Khrushchev to visit the United States. "Keep your friends close and your enemies closer," he said. Eisenhower was known to be an extraordinary strategist, but what strategy could he use against his enemy guest? You know what he did? He invited him to church. On Sunday morning, September 27, 1959, President Eisenhower invited Nikita Khrushchev to accompany him to a worship service at Gettysburg Presbyterian Church. Now, why would he invite this anti-Christian communist to go to church? Because Eisenhower was a genius. He knew that no matter how scary the butcher could be, no matter how evil, godless, and profane the Communist Party had become, God held the higher ground. And if he could get Khrushchev into church, the power of the gospel just might reach into that cold heart. Khrushchev turned him down, and the rest is a history lesson for another day. But the point is this: even Dwight David Eisenhower understood that there are some things only God can control. Like Ike, we need to believe that God can and will control anything for us. Brothers and sisters, our relationship is with the only one who is completely reliable, completely honorable, and ultimately able to control anything. It's time for us to embrace him and give him control. Are you carrying around worries or unable to let go of trying to control your own life? If there's something you're trying to get control of in your life, if your life is consumed by worry, if you need to let go of one thing or many things, I invite you during this last hymn to make a commitment to the Prince of Peace and ask him to control your life. Amen.